We've all heard stories about having a bad trip. Maybe you text your ex at 3 a.m. or you cry in a bathroom for an hour. That is child's play. In this video, I am going to show you what happens when the human brain doesn't just glitch, it completely self-destructs. We are going from a man who decided to fight a lake full of alligators with his bare hands to a martial artist who used a kitchen stove for something so evil I can't even say it in the intro. These are the 4 levels of drug-induced madness, ranked from painful to absolute nightmare. And trust me, by the time we get to level 4, you will wish you stopped watching at level 1. Let's begin. The glitch and preservation. The pencil incident. Let's start with something that is supposed to be natural. We have all heard that magic mushrooms are one of the safest recreational substances out there. And scientifically, that is technically true. To actually die from the toxicity of psilocybin itself, you would need to eat dozens, maybe even hundreds of grams of the stuff. But just because the chemical won't stop your heart, that doesn't mean it won't stop your brain from keeping you alive. Welcome to the concept of behavioral toxicity. This is when the software in your head that screams, "Don't touch that fire," or "Don't jump off that ledge," simply uninstalls itself. Case in point, the pencil incident. Picture a calm Saturday afternoon. You are a 21-year-old man. You just got home from work and you decide to unwind with some shrooms. At first, it's probably the usual stuff. Colors get brighter, patterns start crawling on the walls, and time stretches out like taffy. But then, the euphoria crashes. You enter a state of total panic. When this man arrived home, he was already acting erratically. His family, seeing him freaking out, tried to restrain him to calm him down. But in a surge of adrenaline, he broke free, smashing a glass vase in the process. Now, a sober person sees broken glass and avoids it. But this man's preservation instinct was gone. He threw himself onto the floor and began aggressively rubbing his body against the glass shards, shredding the skin on his arms and legs. But that isn't even the part that earns this story a spot on the list. His family finally managed to pull him off the glass and sat him down at a desk to breathe. On that desk sat a simple, harmless number 2 pencil. In a split second of drug-induced psychosis, he grabbed the pencil, stood it upright on the desk, and violently slammed his head down onto it. He didn't just do it once. When he raised his head back up, his family saw that he had jammed the pencil repeatedly into both of his eye sockets. He tried to stand up again to do something else, but his body finally gave out and he vomited on himself before collapsing. Despite emergency services rushing to the scene, they couldn't save him. He didn't die from the mushrooms. He died because the mushrooms convinced him that destroying his own eyes was a good idea. That is a glitch in self-preservation. But while losing your vision is horrific, our next level involves a glitch in something even more primal, the ability to feel pain. And to understand that, we need to go to Florida to meet a man who decided to pick a fight with a literal dinosaur. The glitch in pain. The Gator Incident. If breaking your own face with a pencil sounds bad, wait until you hear what happens when your brain decides to turn off the switch for physical pain entirely. This brings us to methamphetamine. When this substance hits your bloodstream, you don't just feel high, you feel invincible. It cranks up your sympathetic nervous system and triggers an explosive release of dopamine that makes you feel like a god. Your heart races, you become laser focused, and you are filled with an unstoppable energy that can last for 16 hours with no sleep and no food. But when you take too much, your body doesn't just get energized, it turns into an absolute war zone. On May 26th in Orlando, Florida, police received a call about a man acting erratically on a racetrack, shaking violently and screaming for his son. When officers arrived, the man had vanished from the track. He was eventually spotted in a nearby lake. But this wasn't just any lake. It was a lake infested with alligators. Now imagine being in that water. A normal human brain would be screaming in terror. But this man's brain was so fried on meth that when officers tried to throw him a life vest, he refused it. He wasn't swimming away from the gators, he was getting attacked by them. And here is the glitch. He didn't care. The pain signals that should have been telling him, hey, you are being eaten, were simply not getting through. Then, like a scene straight out of a horror movie, the man actually resurfaced. He climbed out of the lake, covered in severe injuries from the alligators, but he wasn't stopping. In fact, he was holding a pair of gardening shears. He charged at the police officers with the shears. In response, they did what they are trained to do. They tased him repeatedly. Now, getting tased is supposed to incapacitate you. It locks up your muscles and hurts like hell. But for this guy, it had absolutely no effect. His central nervous system was so disrupted that his body had lost all touch with reality. The rampage only ended when he jumped into the passenger seat of the police cruiser and tried to grab a rifle, forcing officers to use lethal force. This is what happens when a drug hijacks your brain's reward system so severely that your organs literally cook from the inside out. He fought nature and he lost. But while fighting an alligator is insane, at least it is a physical threat. Our next level involves a glitch in perception, where the threat isn't a monster in a lake, but a bag of chips and a sudden voice in your head telling you to kill. The glitch in perception, the 108 stabs. We need to talk about the safest drug on the list. We all know the stereotype about weed. You smoke a little too much, you eat an entire bag of Doritos, maybe you get a little anxious, and then you fall asleep watching cartoons. It is biologically impossible to fatally overdose on THC alone. You would have to smoke thousands of joints in minutes to even get close. So we assume it's harmless. But here is the terrifying truth. While the drug won't kill your body, in rare cases, it can completely rewrite your reality software. This is what doctors call cannabis-induced psychosis, and for one man in California, it was a death sentence. The year is 2018. Picture this. You just met someone new at a dog park. She seems nice, normal, harmless. You invite her back to your apartment for a quick spark-up session. It's California, it's legal, it's a Tuesday. Everything is chill. You are sitting on the couch, maybe thinking about ordering a pizza. Then, the glitch happens. Without warning, the woman's brain snaps. The dopamine and sensory input overwhelm her processing center, and she stops seeing you. She starts seeing a threat. She suddenly shoots up from her seat, walks to the kitchen, and grabs not one, but 3 knives. In the transcript of the event, the conversation makes absolutely no sense. She asks about chips and ice cream, then suddenly accuses the man of trying to chop up salsa. Before he can even process the confusion, she lunges. This wasn't a fight. This was a massacre. She stabbed him, and then she stabbed him again and again. In a normal violent altercation, the attacker stops when the victim goes down, or when they get tired. But her brain was caught in a loop. She stabbed this innocent man 108 times. Just try to count to 108 right now in your head. It takes a long time. That is how long she was carving into him. She didn't stop there. She killed his dog, and then, in a display of total psychosis, she turned the knife on herself, stabbing her own body 40 times. When the police arrived, they found a scene that looked like a slaughterhouse. And just like our guy in Florida, her brain had turned off the pain switch. Officers tased her 4 times. Nothing happened. She wouldn't drop the knife. The only way they could stop her was for an officer to physically swing a baton and break her arm to force her hand open. Now here's the part that is going to make you angry. Because this was proven to be cannabis-induced psychosis, meaning she wasn't in control of her faculties, the court system treated her like a victim of her own brain chemistry. She didn't get life in prison. She didn't even get 10 years. She got probation and 100 hours of community service. The man's father had to watch the woman who turned his son into a puzzle piece walk free, all because her brain glitched on a harmless drug. She walked away, but the next guy on our list, he is going to rot in a cell for the rest of his life. And honestly, after you hear what he cooked in his kitchen, you'll agree that prison is too good for him. Get ready, because level 4 is where we lose our humanity completely. The total system failure. The stove incident. We have reached the darkest corner of the human mind. If the last story made you angry, this one will make you sick. This is the story of a 26-year-old martial arts fighter and his sparring partner. These were disciplined men, trained to control their bodies and minds. But after consuming a massive, unnatural amount of mushrooms, that discipline evaporated. The glitch here wasn't just visual or emotional, it was biblical. The fighter didn't just think his friend was an intruder. He became convinced that the world was ending and that they were locked in a literal battle between God and the devil. And because he was a trained fighter, he won that battle. But he didn't just knock his friend out. Another friend walked into the apartment later that day expecting to find them chilling on the couch. Instead, he found a scene that would traumatize a seasoned homicide detective. The martial artist was standing in the kitchen, completely naked, standing over the stove. He was cooking. When the friend looked closer, he realized what was in the pan. It was a human heart. The victim was found on the couch, missing his face, his tongue, and his heart. And the autopsy revealed a detail that is pure nightmare fuel. He was still alive when his chest was ripped open. Unlike the woman in California who walked free, this man didn't get a pass. The legal system looked at this horror show and sentenced him to 47 years in state prison. It is a strange contradiction in the law. One person blames psychosis and goes home. The other gets nearly life in prison. But honestly, looking at what happened in that kitchen, 47 years doesn't feel long enough. This brings us to the terrifying conclusion. At the end of the day, your brain is basically just a wet biological computer. And as we've seen, it doesn't take much to trigger the blue screen of death. These stories aren't here to lecture you. They are here to remind you that the wall between sanity and cooking your friend's heart is a lot thinner than you think. Is a few hours of a high really worth risking a lifetime in a cage? Probably not. If you need a palate cleanser after all that horror, check out the video on screen right now. It is way less traumatizing, I promise. Thank you so much for watching.